And we're live. Well, welcome, Chris. Welcome to the Real Talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you. We've been talking about this for a little while. We've been discussing a lot of stuff that's happening in our industry. It's really good to have you in here and really pick your mind and break down what's going on in the supply chain and the component world.
It's exciting times right now. It really is.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
All right. My name's Chris Winn, president of Sales and Service Inc., better known as SSI. I've been with the company about 28 years. The company's been around about 35 years, been in active control about 17 years of it. We specialize in the back end of the industry, so post-wafer fabrication area. So once it leaves probe, most of the areas that impact a wafer until it's packaged, tested, and then sent on to a final customer, assembly, a package, an MCM, anything like that, we affect most of that portion of the process.
Well, right now, that's the biggest challenge we have, and you're part of that. So right now, so what type of products, machines, so what can you break that down into us, what you get into?
So we have basically three categories to the company. So we have assembly materials. Okay, sorry. Yeah. We have assembly materials, we have equipment, and then we have high-tech process variants. So the assembly materials, those can be substrates, lead frames, chip carriers, a number of things used in the packaging process of a die or a chip. We also have the assembly equipment. So we have the equipment that is used to process a wafer, to process a die, to package a die, then to handle and test a die as well, and then inspect it finally. And that inspection can happen at just about any time through the process. We have numerous pieces of equipment for that. Then we have process materials on the back end of it, which are the chemicals and a lot of the materials used in the assembly and test process of it. So we do distribution on the chemicals. We do a manufacturer's rep side for most of the equipment.
Okay. So when will it, today is a lot of companies setting up fabs. It's the biggest news right now, from the Intels, TSMC, all the Samsung, everybody's setting up fabs, expanding. Where do you come into play when someone announces something like that? Where do you play in?
Great question. So we come into play once the wafer is founded, and then it goes on into a packaging and assembly house, which is happening a lot in the U.S. So just about every one of those companies, minus TSMC. TSMC is a fab company only. They are handling a lot of our customers' wafers. So our customers have their wafers fabbed there. Then once they're fabbed, then the customers take them in, and we do a lot of the back-end processing. So we actually take the wafer, we can thin it down to its final thickness, then we can dice it, then we can help pick and place, die attach, package, test, assemble, wire bond, a number of the portions of the process across it. So we sell a lot of the consumables and the actual equipment that does the packaging and test process.
Okay. I know there's two sides to the front end chip making and back end chip making, right? So can you explain the difference between front end and back end?
Awesome question. Yeah. And they are becoming really very close nowadays. Okay. So the front end chip making is your fabrication of the wafer. That's when it's a whole silicon. Well, silicon's the large medium nowadays, but there's silicon carbide, indium phosphate, a number of different wafers out there. Then once you process the wafer, and that's when you start dicing it into the actual device size, the chiplet. Okay. So once it becomes a device, the difference between the two, the front end is the fabrication of the wafer. The back end is where you take it, you thin it, you dice it, and you package it. But they are becoming one nowadays. You have a lot of integrated electronics, stacked ICs, 2.5, 3D ICs. That's where you're stacking, not wire bonding. So you're using male-female interconnects, and you're stacking die, and then you're testing those. Those are used in very high-end ICs, in your memory nowadays, logic, a number of different events. The only area we're not seeing that is big power devices yet. Okay. That will be the future, though.
Yeah, so the scalability, right?
It's the speed and the power. Yeah, nowadays, speed on processors, speed on memory is important. Power products coming up, it's going to be important not to have wire bonds.
Yeah, the heat dissipation factors of also energy putting into them. So I know big things today is silicon carbide or gallium nitride GaNs is a big coming to scale with fruition of. I know silicon carbide right now is big because you can push more power at it, more efficient.
Absolutely, absolutely. The automotive industry, the power device industry, even the cell phone industry. And we're not talking about massive amounts, but efficiency and power transfer as well. So heat creates turbulence or resistance in the product. That cuts down the efficiency. So your cell phone, instead of lasting 22 hours, lasts 18. That's not competitive in the market anymore. So your Tesla, you want to get your 350 miles of range out of a Tesla. You know, the new electronic bikes coming out, you want the range. So there's different needs for all of it, but you're correct. the density, the power, the efficiency, all of that is becoming so important to the industry.
And the form factor, the size. They want to get more power, more efficiency, but smaller size.
Absolutely. Just like we saw in the PC industry through the 80s into the 90s and then into the micro books, the small power books, then it went into the handhelds. It's just, instead of it happening every 1 or 2 years now it's happening every 4 to 6 months. The form factors are shrinking, the power needs are intensifying, the efficiencies are intensifying. So we're just seeing it's rampant right now.
Yeah. So from your experience, right? Today, a lot of things are changing. Last 2 years has accelerated the technology revolution, really pushed the digitalization of using interconnect. Everything's connected, the Internet of Things, and how every company is becoming a very connected company. And from consumer behavior, business behavior, compute, everything's changing. That's why I want to go back and take it, because you've been in this business for a couple decades and you understand where we were, say, in the 90s and where we are in the 2000s and where we are in the 2020s. How has that changed? How has the chip production or the process changed or evolved through that?
Oh, wow. What a great question. So we have gone from centers of the world where certain technology would come out of areas of the world. Processors were usually always an American process. You had your Intels, you had your AMD, Xilinx, stuff like that. Nowadays, we're seeing more regional builds. So what we're seeing is companies putting fabs, build centers in regions of the world, founding a wafer in one end of the world, shipping it to one other end of the world to assemble it, then to ship it to a final marketplace is inefficient nowadays. We're seeing huge sweeping changes and that type of thing. But how the electronic industry has changed in the manufacturing, we've seen the distribution of companies going away from being their own fab, with companies like TSMC coming up. It would be unheard of in the old days to not have a wafer fab if you were an electronics company.
Correct.
Nowadays, it's smart for a lot of companies. You look at your Qualcomms, your Broadcoms, they're all fabless. It doesn't mean that they couldn't build their own wafers, and it doesn't mean they don't in small batches. It just means for their scale of economy, they focus on the skill of building a product, not the skill of building a wafer.
Yep.
And they form that. So we're seeing a lot more distribution of certain technical capabilities into the hands of the highly technical support services.
So everybody is, as I say, is quantifying their skill set. They're really getting into it, making it more efficient, be able to not to be the master of all trades, but experience in what I said, now back end and front end is game, but now it's separate, but it's getting closer and closer together, but because they're getting smarter, the systems are getting smarter and innovation is changing. So from that end is, as you say, the US today, a big talk is, made back in the US, move it all back here, all of that. And you've seen that transfer offshore, now trying to come back onshore. What is the biggest, right now, the biggest constraint that you see that? Was it when it transferred, was it the technologies or is it just the cost? What do you think, why did all the manufacturing for wafers or for the packaging go offshore?
Good question. Once again, there's never a pure bet on these things.
Yeah.
So transferring your product offshore didn't instantly equate to a better product.
Yes.
More wise people building it, cheaper prices, all of that. Typically, it went for prices. Typically, it was cost of ownership. They were looking for lower cost of labor. They were looking for longer work hours. They were looking for more regional shipping, to high volume areas and where other capabilities were surrounding them. What we're finding is that the world economy over the last, especially COVID era, has smoothed out. The U.S. is competitive again for costs. We have a highly educated base here. We have NAFTA agreements. We have Mexico with a highly educated base and very competitive environment there over the Asian counterparts that they're working with. We're finding that the European Union has become wiser and they're becoming more competitive in a lot of ways. So what we're seeing is that the cost equation of just cheap labor isn't the same anymore. There is no cheap labor, by the way, anymore. China is no longer affordable like it once was. Korea is not. Japan has not been for a long time. What we're seeing is the centers becoming more of a regional build center for technology, and then you're going to see nationalities or areas where regional builds are needed to come back into play.
Yeah. Well, onto that to transfer onshore, offshore, and all the process. But how much of this process, or I would say the chip production, because that's the biggest talk today, is automated?
So much of it. So what we found in COVID, where a lot of factories had to shut down human contact to keep human contact down, there's big companies. I'll name a big processor company out there. A lot of the engineers work from home.
Yeah.
The equipment, the only time engineers were needed is if there was something that had to be worked on the system itself. But then you could send in a solitary operator or individual to do the work on it while the engineer monitored the progress and outflow off-site.
Yeah, off-site.
And that's still playing through to this day. So they're finding more and more efficiencies. Now, software, AI, all of that is coming into play because they're able to get the dashboard readouts knowing absolute efficiency, absolute yields, absolute technology reads. And so they're able to make decisions on the fly using software technology, AI, very little human interface anymore.
Yeah.
So, and it's also helping yields improve by lack of human degradation to the product.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. So that's where we come into is how much human input goes through these processes is with labor. Because a lot of course, today, present day, a lot of people's like a lot of factories being open here. But how many operators does it take to run a chip wafer or chip wafer company, or does it take to run a packaging house, or the process of doing that? Is it take tens of thousands, or is it the process is fully automated? You just need the operator behind the machine to press the buttons on the computers, as you would say, to make it go through the line.
Correct.
Yeah.
So you have your GUIs, your graphic user interfaces.
Correct.
Just about every system has it. How companies look at a system when they buy a high volume system, not a one-off. Say they're going to buy 15 disco saws for dicing of wafers. Okay. They're looking at how many operators do we have to operate that one system. So it isn't one operator per system anymore. There's still human interfaces. You have to change blades for one on a system. You have to change water nozzles. You have to clean systems. There are PMs. Yeah. So they read indexes on that. So mean time between interruption. So there's mean time between a system down. There's 3 or 4 of these indexes that companies rate. And when they buy your systems in high volume, so any big company, a Micron, an Intel, a Skyworks, any of these guys, they look at those numbers, and that's how they rate the efficiency of your system. So if you want to sell 100 systems to a company, you have to know your indexes there, your mean time between assist, your mean time between a hard down, mean time between a PM. You have to be able to give them quotable statistics that they can stick to, that their floors can run on. So it still takes 1,000 people on a large floor of a company. But 20 years ago, that would have been 5,000, 6,000 on a floor to run it, because you would have had someone at every system.
So right now, the compute is giving better data intelligence to make better decisions of what it is. But when you go in, even as I said, to be as a service provider or to provide the machine, you would have to know their, I would say, DNA, how they operate, what they're offering them, the process they do, get that information, survey it, sense it, and say, okay, this will fit your application, this will fit your objective that you're trying to reach, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. The advent of AI, which is really coming on right now, and I'll quote this a lot today, it's taking indicators, so you're able to actually build defect or qualification classification indexes. That's a big deal. What that allows you to do is look at different problems. It can take things like amperage input on a SAW or input off of another system, and it can say, we've seen this before. And right before something else happens on the system, this problem has been seen, and it starts building knowledge on that. Yeah. And it starts predicting when you're going to have a problem with the process. Then an engineer looks at it and says, I agree with that information. Let's classify that as a coming defect, and they can get ahead of yield losses. So they're able to use things like AI and index learning to physically make better products, and that's a force multiplier.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable in every segment, because of course myself is in the finished component side. You are on the foundation of producing the actual components and the wafers and the parts. So it's similar, ecosystem, but 2 different products we're selling in the back end side, because it's very insightful and to that. So now coming to today, or in the present last 2 years of really what's going on, what do you see? What's going on the ground? What's the process you're seeing with these wafer companies between, I know there's US and also Mexico. Mm-hmm. What is the transition of a lot of stuff coming from maybe Asia transferring back into the North American region, as you would say? What have you seen? What have you seen for the last 2 years during, right before COVID and then to present day? What's the demographic? What has changed, and what's the demand change?
Great questions. Yeah. So let's unpack that. So what we've seen is we have seen a move back to the U.S. in a lot of areas. And this happened pre-COVID. The companies were looking at more regional builds, so where there's purchasing regions. A few of the big markets in the U.S. are obviously memory, processor. We have great ones. Logic, we have power companies, and we've had a lot of M&A going on in a lot of those regions. So you've had either a shattering of some of them, or you've had a huge combination of mega powers coming together now in some of these areas. You've had companies in the power markets enter them. You've had companies like Korea that left LED, and they're now coming heavy into power with Wolfspeed. You've got companies like Qualcomm, Skyworks, Broadcom in the communications area that are, your 5G, 4G, traditionally 3G before that, 5G, and then looking forward into 6G into the future. You've got those guys. They're now looking at building in more and more areas of the U.S., Asia, and Europe regionally. So we're going to see growth and compartmentalization of that. With the M&A going on in like the power markets, we're seeing a lot of compartmentalization of where products are being built. Since Tesla's building a lot in the U.S., we're seeing a lot of the suppliers want to build product here to get it just in time to them versus building in Europe and shipping over here. So we're going to see a lot more growth like that, especially with electric cars. Most of them are being built in America.
Correct.
It'll be a while before any country catches that. And then the electrification of America, which people don't think about being a semiconductor thing, but it is. All of the electronics, all of this is probably one of the largest drivers. Right now, we have drivers on the market more than we've ever seen in the history of the electronics industry. You have mobile electronics. You have the electrification of the U.S. You have electric cars coming through. You have 5G. We've only scratched the surface of what 5G is. And then there's 6G right behind that. All the wireless. Then you have the medical market. You have more and more telemedicine. You have more industrialization of the hospital complex on this. You have everybody working from home more. And that's here to stay. So you're going to see a huge driver out there. We've only scratched the surface of what we're seeing.
I mean, I could not agree more. It's, from being in the industry, it's very exciting. But for others, it's like the world's changing. We're going to be I would say artificial intelligence, very AI based. But it's really exciting what's happening with, again, the pandemic's kind of accelerated this to push this into the igniter for this next technology revolution this decade. But one thing I want to break down to your question, you brought up a good point, was M&A. The last 10 years, you would see a massive amount of M&A has happened between semiconductor companies. Companies buying each other, acquiring each other, taking over market share to get more market share. Most of them are public companies, or they were backed by people. They're just acquiring for market share. And what happens is, do you think that's also a driver of why we have so much supply chain issues in chip? Because a lot of companies bought each other. They weren't fully immersed. They didn't, catalogs, nothing matched. And now they get to the point where demand has spiked and they don't have the capacity or the know-how, or just, again, mismanagement or closing of factories that they shouldn't have, and because of costs caused some of this. I mean, have you seen,
Absolutely. Yeah. So with a lot of the M&A going on, so they buy a company and they buy a customer list, they buy a product line, and then they have to figure out how to integrate that. Companies that have bought into software in the past, Oracle, SAP, interfaces like that, typically buying the software means that's just the beginning. It's all of the information flow that you have to put in. Same thing happened in M&A. So they bought a company, but there's a lot of technology, a lot of products, a lot of people, a lot of IP you have to put in place. And that doesn't just translate to the new company. It's not just a language barrier, but you have to think of it like one, because there are physical languages of how a company operates, and that doesn't mean that the acquisition company operates in the same manner. And we've seen that all the time. They would shut down products, or they'd move a product line to another company, and they'd have huge yield losses, and they'd wonder why. Well, the other people knew how to anticipate the problems for years, and the ones that inherited the process didn't. We find this, and we work with companies all the time that are fighting this type of problem. So it's and that's not going to end, and that's not just something a technology can have. This is the age of where people were putting that into databases using technology, but it had not been categorized yet or put into a catalog to where that technology just easily transferred. That's where AI, that's where the future comes in with databases, data transfer, all of that. Companies are now realizing how important that is.
Yeah, I mean, of course, everything you nailed it on the head right there, is with data. At the end of the day, every company needs to be a data intelligent company.
Absolutely.
And driving yourself forward, investing in, but it's not just data, is the culture of changing the people to be data driven, because of course we're a creature of habit. A lot of people in any business, doesn't matter what industry you're in, is a creature of habit how it is, but they're not using the data for intelligence. They're just using it for transaction based.
Just watch how many people had a hard time getting on Zoom meetings when COVID hit. You know, when COVID became center place, and I've got sales guys, and they're all wonderful people. But when they go out, some of them were road warriors. They were 3-4 days a day on the road, and other guys were 5 days a week on the road, and they'd write reports in one day. Now they're having to get onto Zooms, and they're having to call people. This was not the interface they were used to. Same thing translates to a lot of the other problems that we were seeing. So it's certainly something that is commonplace with everybody. No one was immune to it.
Do you think that has improved the efficiency and output?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm saying.
And you can't hide anywhere now.
Yeah.
How often does your phone ring after hours?
Oh, you have to, I mean, it's not just privately or business. It is as you call it, I call it the Amazon effect, because I think Amazon, no matter how it is, they changed the whole way everybody operates, because it's the now factor. Buy it now, want it now, get the instant gratification, right? So when you send a message out, or you want to procure something or buy something or message, you want that instant gratification of getting a response. So we're all very up to, like, that person, if I, example, text you, Chris, and you don't get back to me in an hour, and I'm like, what happened to him? Something wrong? What's he doing? What's going on? Where's he at? So we start judging. I mean, before we used to send you an email and take a day to get back, or maybe 2 days to get back to give a quotation. But now it's like, if you don't acknowledge it, I got it, I'm working on it, here are the updates, you kind of lose that customer experience, or just the friendship experience, or whatever is happening. So I think the technology has sped up everything.
Absolutely.
Has speeded the way we operate, the way we move. And overall, as I said, it's made things more efficient, but it's also made it a little scary, because there's a lot of information out there.
I can't hide anywhere anymore.
Yeah.
Nowhere safe.
Information. I mean, nowhere safe. You can't hide. Your DNA's all over the World Wide Web. As you call it, the Googler, the Google. You can find anybody's DNA on there, and you can't really hide anymore. As much as people want to be private, it's hard to be private. But I mean, again, we're not worried. That's something that people are worried about. But how the technology is advancing, and us being in the hardware region, you're being on I'm selling the component side, you actually helping selling the machines, the products to build those components. It's really exciting where the world's going at. And so what do you see right now with the business trends? I know probably business in the last year, because of all the production, all the increase of production size and investments in the production. What's happened in the last 2021? What did you see from the start of 2021 to the end of 2021?
I saw a lot of people mature.
Okay.
So when I say that, when COVID first hit, there was so much worry, so much concern, so much fear. Supply chain's going to fall off the earth. It's going to dry up. There's tons of problems out there. Price increases. I've had price increases on our products that I've never seen in the history of our company in 1 year. What I saw is a market mature. I saw a market learn to accept longer lead times, start communicating on what we can do to improve. Look at where supply chain is falling short. What can we help? What do we have to accept? There are areas we can't change, but there's areas we can cut time out of. So I saw people start to roll up their sleeves and work together a little bit more in a mature, supportive manner to help the end results. It really, I thought it warmed my heart a lot, because it showed me that companies can still have good working relations. Customer service became more important than anything. Our sales guys weren't as worried about orders. They were worried about the customer experience and the customer being taken care of. Our CS people, our engineers, everybody had to just communicate a lot more. The news was seldom good, so you became very good at delivering less than savory news. But the marketplace matured in a way that allowed us to do that and not lose. I'm sorry, you can't have it. And when you can have it, you're going to pay 3x for it. Companies started to learn that. And I hope coming out of this that we are able to roll some of that back, and that we're able to be friendly with our customers about that. And we're able to have a laugh about this and have grown from this. Maybe some of us are stronger together. Some of us will be recycled out of the process. But overall, I saw a lot of maturity and some things that gave me some real hope about the future of the industry.
That's the first time I've asked this question a lot. It's the first time I heard that. Last year is the world, everybody's matured. And looking at it, thinking about it, and you're correct, because the beginning of 2021, there was so many unknown. Everybody was uncertain. They weren't confident. They weren't the process, because we came out of a world, out of an industry. I mean, in the last, I would say 5 to 10 years, especially in electronics industries, everything is about cost, price, and liability. I don't want to hold anything and push every liability, like from the service providers to manufacturers. It's all about PPV. Everything, reduce cost. I want it now. I want it free. Everything's about penny pinching in this. And then it comes to the point where there was a pandemic. Everything shut down for about 4 to 5 months. And then all of a sudden the stimulus and all the things happened, and the world started evolving and coming in and going, starting from 2021. You're right. Everybody started trying to find the direction. Where are they? And started maturing to the point of using technology in general. You say mature, it's like, how do I use the camera? How do I use the phone? How do I use the software tools that I've been had in my fingertips for the last 3-4 years that I've just been not using? And how do I quantify that to get a better result, the faster result? And the biggest thing is about price. Not so price sensitivity went out the window right now because, of course, the demand jumped 10x. Demand went up. At that point, yes, inflation is there because a lot of money got pumped into the economy, which tried to stimulate the business and coming out of a complete, shutdown, global shutdown, and it's completely, I would say, we got turned upside down. And then when we flipped back over, as you would say, is we matured. Right? We matured and came in 2020 and now going to 2022. Everybody you talk to, it's not about walking in there like, Chris, yeah, how about that cost? We need to negotiate that price. But now it's about, when can we deliver? Right? When's the lead time? How can we pull in the lead time? Price is X. That's not secondary now. It's like, when can we deliver? We have all these projects and what's going on. So is that really what you're saying? Is like, it's not about the really cost or negotiations about that anymore. It's about, when can we get the product? When can we deliver?
Absolutely. Yeah. That maturity comes into a few directions too. You and I are not billion-dollar entities. We're not the Arrows, Avnets, Co-CIs for us, big trading companies out there. A lot of companies sometimes might look at a smaller company and say, why would I work with that? You're going to be more expensive. You're going to be all of these different things that they're worried about. But what I think a lot of companies found is in COVID, when things were hard to get and you couldn't find them with people, there were companies like ours that were more fluid. Look, we return calls the same day. We return emails the same day. We have the same customer service person you're dealing with, not one of 15 million of them on a switchboard. Companies like ours are more hands-on and fluid, fast, I would say fleet of foot to be able to react to customers. And I think customers appreciated that. Depending on how well we were able to act, we had better networks. We had built friendships and real relationships. So when companies needed something, we were able to lean and call on those things to really support and help a customer. That is worth a lot. And I think it reminded people the value of communication and relationship too.
Ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, and it's the customer experience, as we call it, the Ritz-Carlton motto. They wrote a book about this thesis, but I could not agree more. I mean, you nailed it. It's customer experience because companies like ourselves, we became a niche to provide a service that others could not. We became a niche and came out and we grew through it. We said what the demand was. We had to create our companies, we gave the service. We responded to them instantly. They got the affirmation they needed, and we tried to find a solution for their problem.
Absolutely. That's one of our taglines for our company, as you can see it on that, bringing solutions to you.
Yes.
One of our most important mottos is being able to look at a customer need. When a customer calls, that's an opportunity. It doesn't matter if they're angry about something that we've done, they're happy about something. If they're calling us, it's providing us the opportunity to do something for them. And how we handle that is how the next interaction with them will work.
Yeah. I mean, you're 100%, you're building credibility, you're building relationship, you're building a seat at the table for all future opportunities, and you're building, like I said, your own legacy and branding of who your company is, who you're going to be for the long term, and the direction you're going to go. And of course, I think all the employees, all your team members, all your colleagues, everybody matured to that time to really, this is the customer expectations, these are the needs. And the digital world is there too, because I think we've all led with more empathy than we ever have. There's a lot more empathy in the world today, a lot more concern about how are you, how's everything going, everybody okay, about health process, because what's going on. It's not about, okay, the product, it's secondary now. It's like, how are you doing? How can we help? How can we work together? How can I help you out? So that maturity is happening, and it's evolving. We're all evolving.
Absolutely. And it never became more important than during this time. I mean, the ability to communicate and to execute didn't mean that you delivered it. It just meant that you gave them a deliverable.
Yep.
And that never meant more than now. And I think going forward, that's going to resonate even more importantly.
Yeah, I think it's going to, again, it's creating a market share of longevity in companies. The big companies, yes, they have a lot of value because they have money, they can do a lot, but the smaller companies are more agile, they can pivot, they can make changes, they can customize a solution much easier for their, for any other customers than today, because a lot of the customers today, they just need, they have a line down, a product down, they need a machine, they need a component. What can we do? Let's find a solutions, work together. Can we find an alternative? Can we find something? A lot of the catalog houses, they're structured. They cannot go outside that. They cannot go outside their domain. They're stuck in that. There's a lot of politics. But moving forward, I want to get into information about like the logistics side. Let's get into logistics. And you deal with a lot of machines, right? You deal with a lot of heavy equipment, a lot of machines coming in. And I don't know, how much of that equipment is brought in by air for you or brought in by ocean?
It's a healthy mix of both, and I'll tell you why. A lot of the heavy, very high-end equipment has to come over by air just due to vibration, noise, and certain standards.
Okay.
So we have to actually put sensors on the equipment. And not just the little labels that people put on for tilt. I mean, we actually have electronic boxes on the equipment to understand how much G load they've taken. Vibration, loud noises, harshness that could cause resonance. So when we deal with equipment, I'll use, for instance, X-ray. So X-ray is very sensitive. So you have to have equipment that's highly calibrated, and it still gets calibrated when it's installed. But you have a difference in calibration that can get damaged if the machine takes a high G load and the machine comes off axis. So we have equipment like that, and that is measuring, down to microns of defect looking down inside of a wafer. So you can't, 1 micron defect off throws your whole spec off. So we have to have equipment. So a lot of that is air freighted over. We are seeing a lot more air freight shipments on lower end equipment nowadays just to guarantee that it gets in for production. This equipment is so important that they're not worried about the 6 to 8 week cost or the 6 to 8 weeks by sea traditionally, which now could be 3 months, 4 months. They're more concerned about getting the machine on the floor and making money for them, because every piece of equipment is contributing to a process. ROI.
Yeah, ROI.
So paying $2,000 for something by sea versus $20,000 by air is nothing to add to the cost nowadays for them. And that's weird, but it's happening right and left. So we're seeing it. A lot of the chemicals, those are still being shipped by sea, but then we're shipping a lot by air if it has to be more just in time. We're seeing such demand where we're making products and having to ship them, from Europe to the U.S. just in time.
Yeah, and that just in time factor, that is one thing. It's like, how do you get the products in? Because it causes inflation on product cost, shipment cost, logistics cost. Because at the end of the day, everybody's in the business to cover their costs and make a little bit of money. And through a provider, how does that work? And the airline freight is not getting any cheaper. The process is not getting any cheaper. And also you handle chemicals too, right? And DG you ship by air or by ocean?
We ship both on those. Okay. So we have the good fortune, the chemicals we handle not having to be labeled as dangerous goods. So we're safe on that. They're actually known fire extinguishants. They love having
they're retardant, the kind of retardants.
Yeah. So we're able to escape that portion of it. We have other companies that we work with that handle caustic chemicals and have to have heavy DG loads on them. And that has to be mostly by ship. Planes don't want them. Ours are still very expensive because you pay by the pound to go on, or kilogram to go on an airplane, from Europe. And a lot of ours are metric tons at a time of material. So it is a high dollar cost to do it, but the function of getting the customer supplied and maintained, companies don't want downtime. And we're getting now to where some companies are hand to mouth on being able to get just in time. So we are shipping a lot by air still.
To bring it in and make sure you get there on time. So from the point of what is a standard lead time for one of your machines right now? What do you think?
Let's take a wafer saw. So coming in right now, if you had forecasted it and we put it into the forecast, you could be 6 weeks to 12 weeks That's normal. That's not bad. That's with the forecast. If you were a company that did not forecast it and you came in and you bought something that was a high running item, like a wafer saw, there's companies in China buying 100 at a time right now, and you were buying one. Your lead time right now would probably be 12 months.
Wow, 1 year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the forecasts, when your customers, do they give you forecasts that are hard forecasts, or how does that work? How does that operate when you...
Nowadays, everything's a hard forecast. If they're giving us a forecast, they're wanting guarantees against the forecast. I mean, they're almost trying to put legal, let's call it pins in it, where we have to abide by them. We don't have a lot of competition on some of the products. Others, we have heavy competition. But let's address this and unpack it a little bit. We get forecasts, and traditionally we always try to work with the big customers to get forecasts. What that did for us, that allowed us to allocate resources. We have to have people that install the equipment, do the training on the equipment, do PMs on other pieces of equipment while they're there. So we have to allocate resources. Now that's more important than ever. Sometimes we're able to get equipment, and then the equipment will sit there for a month or two before resources can be allocated to get them installed. And that's for the factor that you have to have people nowadays that have had the shots, the vaccinations. You have to have people that aren't sick. I mean, we've had a lot of people get sick. You have to have people that can travel in. Some of these are outside the country, and so there's travel restrictions. There's so many variances going on right now, and those affect the lead times of us to be able to execute as well, too. Yeah,
that's what my next question was. How does that work from the machine coming in, the going to the factory? Do you also do the service of setup? Who sets up the machine to the production line?
A lot of the equipment we do the service on also. So we're setting it up, we're troubleshooting. So I've got trained engineers on the floor doing this. Sometimes we have support from the companies that are coming in, but then we take on the long-term support of the equipment. So it does vary, but one of the largest growth areas for us during COVID was the fact that we had boots on the ground in locations that companies that are building equipment out of either Europe or Asia don't have, and they couldn't get resources here. So out of Japan has one of the lower vaccination rates out there, and the engineers aren't allowed out, and they're not allowed in without the cards. So our guys on the floor learned how to be very good with Zoom training, which is very awkward when you have equipment, but you get very creative very quickly, and they had to become very astute at studying, learning, and asking the right questions.
Yeah, well, you're right. Having people on the ground, I can say we're fortunate, or like ourselves, we've had people in Asia, China, Hong Kong. We set up the organization and had soldiers on the ground that could really help us through this process of not traveling. And again, Zoom. It's funny. I'll tell you a little story. Is yesterday, I won't say the company it happened, but it was a manufacturer. One manufacturer, well, say Chinese manufacturer, bought another manufacturer in Southeast Asia through Zoom. They never visited the factory. They spent, over hundreds of millions of dollars. They bought a whole plant through Zoom with attorneys on both sides, did the deal. They said, once it's done, we're going to send our people there. And that's how powerful this is. And this is the world's coming to, because again, there's a lot of restrictions, especially if you go to Asia, a lot of heavy restrictions of in and out of processes. Right now it's 3 weeks. If I went to Hong Kong or China, it's 3 weeks. How do we get through that? And what are your thoughts right now with the next quarter or the next 2 quarters, half of the year? What's your prediction of what's happening with the production, supply chain, or even in business in the next 2 quarters?
Well, again, great question. If you would have asked me before Christmas time, I would have said first quarter going into second quarter is going to be awesome. We're going to learn how to do things better again. We're going to start getting back on the road. We're going to start traveling. We're going to start interfacing more in person. Then came Omicron. Now there will be something next. And so I think we're going to have to take this on a quarter-by-quarter basis. We even had appointments set up to get out there. We have dinners set up again with people, face-to-face dinners. And we were all looking so much forward to it, and then they went out the window in a heartbeat. And then, now they're not even discussing dates. So when we look at things like that, wow, yes, we look forward to it. But next quarter, I think there'll be another variant that comes out. And I hope there isn't, and I hope I'm very wrong. But what I think this whole thing has taught us is that we have to stay flexible. We have to be able to pivot in a second, stay creative, think outside the box, be receptive and open. Just stay positive. You're one of the most positive guys I know. But more people have to be that way, because we have to be resilient about this all and roll with it. We're seeing things that we never thought we would have in modern times and modern days.
And that's the thing is the positivity, but it's a consistency and perseverance through it. That was the first thing coming into this COVID in 2020. I mean, I was in India in February of 20. The little story is, even when this whole pandemic started, we went back. I was in India first week of February of 2020. I was there for a Bangalore office. I was visiting customers. That's when just COVID happened. It happened. Chinese New Year happened. Kobe Bryant died. And then, and this whole variant happened and I flew. I left February 1st. I flew to India. I had to be there for a week. And on February 5th, I have a video because I had to sign some documents. My China operations sent me a letter that I had to sign for the protocol to open up our China office being closed for 2 weeks. They had to open, so they had to get temperature testing, all the process cleanliness, all the things in the office. And I signed that document February 2020, and our office got audited, open February 17th, and it's been open since, which is amazing. And I'm like, what? And then after March, our U.S. and the whole other world shut down, and which was fascinating how every country, every sector, to handle everything different, how it was, but really where we were, because I went into it in March. I started this podcast, started doing videos, being positive and persevering through it. You have to bring energy because, again, you lead with empathy, you lead with the process. We have to help each other because it could be one word, it could be something you read, something that kind of changes your perspective that day. And that's something and my biggest thing the last 2 years is I've learned more, I've touched more people, I've talked to more people than I ever have, and all through technology. And I've taken that and I'm sharing it to the world of whoever wants to listen about, the insights, inspiration, what we can do, and sharing perspective, because again, we grow together. We build a legacy, we grow together, because being siloed, it's not going to get you far.
No.
And that's what I feel like one thing that also the pandemic has gone through is coming to maturity is we're less siloed. We're sharing more than we ever have. Of course, technology is there. We're sharing information. We're trying to help each other and everybody. And of course, social media doesn't help as much because a lot of it's not catered to sharing. It's more about monetizing, making money out of something. But of course, it's sharing and then how we can work and improve each other. And that's how I think it's how do you build your legacy? How do you build the process? How do we inspire people? And how do we improve our ecosystem in electronics that we're in, right? With electronics, doesn't matter what area of electronics we're in, because we're in the foundation, just like you said, everything is growing. Everything's electronic, everything's component based, everything is hardware, and then you throw the software on top of it. The GUI is on top of it, the whole user face is on top of it, right? And that is really what's happening, and educating it and bringing a new generation into this thing, and to have more engineers, have more software engineers, have more kids, have more people into engineering, software engineering, components, hardware, that we are the foundation.
Absolutely. So much going on with the change and innovation, and you hit on it so well. The connection, people were able to dive a little deeper, learn a little bit more with each other. We were able to have more conversations. You didn't have to run to meetings. When I was traveling and going to meetings, I felt accomplished if I could see 3 clients in a day. If I got out to 3 clients, if I did 4 in a day, I was Superman. Now it's not uncommon to hit 6, 7, 8 in a day, and with the same efficacy.
Yeah.
Same efficacy. But I do miss the physical, staring at someone's eyes, shaking a hand, having a meal with them. That will never go away, but it'll be more special when we do. But the amount of communication that we're capable of giving, providing, and doing has just become, it's amazing.
Yeah, I've built. There's 2 years ago, right before COVID. Actually, it was also February. We had a conference in Austin. There was a marketing guy who did a breakout session. It was a seminar. He put it on, and we met there. And I really liked his speaking and what we talked about branding, digitalization. And 2 years. It's been 2 years, and through digitalization, we never saw each other after again. We became like best buds. We shared information, And I think last month, at the December, he came in here, and after 2 years not seeing him, and it felt like we've known each other, but this is the second time we've actually met. Yep. It was powerful though, even though, we haven't, it was like, we know each other so well. We've built relationship over technology, and then in person it's even better because we feel comfortable. Hey, how you doing? It's unbelievable if you really, I guess, lean into it and really drive and put into technology what you can create through relationships. and building that bond, even though you might see someone across the world because you can't travel, but you can still build a relationship, a bond that can last longevity. And I can't wait till there's probably millions of people who build relationships like that right now. And probably when the world opens up and we all travel very easily, it's going to be very powerful for kind of reunion. It's like, finally we get to see each other. Again, like, wow, it's been so long. And, and it's funny today, one of my friends in the industry, I would never done this, but today I do. It's like, he just calls me on FaceTime. I sat in my office just talking to him on FaceTime. Like, he just doesn't call me. He just wants to see my face. Like, we want to see each other's face, we're nonverbal. It's not like, why are you FaceTiming me during work, but I picked up his phone, we chatted, it was fun. We were just joking, but everything has changed, right? Everything has changed. That personality, that personability, talking to each other's, it's completely changed. And I'm very optimistic what's going to happen in the next year, but I think through supply chain, we're in that business, but I think the people are growing to be better people. We are growing up, we're understanding that. And I just hope we, as everybody listening, the generation is like, inspire, because it doesn't happen easy. We have to inspire. That takes hard work to get where you are. There's a path to dig, and I've faced adversity, and I thought it was easy, and it's not.
Every day you have to make that conscious choice. Yeah. You've got to choose to be there, be present. You've got to choose to listen, to engage, to give feedback, to follow through with people. I mean, every day you have nothing but opportunity and choices. It's how you choose to use it.
Yeah. So my final question for you, what is your message to the new generation?
I think that there are more opportunities in technology than there ever have been. When I entered into this industry, we had military, we had the PC industry. Those were the big drivers. You had aerospace, some automotive, but that was only the big guys impacting automotive. The Titans, Detroit, they control. I mean, anyone who did work in that, you were big. Nowadays, anybody can be a disruptor. Anybody. Find some technology and disrupt the hell out of it. Find something that you like. Find a new niche in it, be passionate about it, and disrupt it. Yeah. Find something that no one else has done yet, or find something that no one else has done well yet, and disrupt it. Find a fun niche and enjoy it. This industry has so many areas in it. The other message I'd give them, never burn a bridge. This industry is so small. As big as it is, we're the largest index in the world, but this industry is so small. Over my breadth of years, the amount of people I run into at different companies with different experiences, and not always ones that went positive or perfect. Yeah. We've made mistakes in the past with customers, but we've tried to handle them with the best ethics possible, the best customer service, and it didn't mean that it always ended well. Mm-hmm. But I've had engineers or people that were buyers at companies come up to me 20 years later and say, I remember the situation, and remember, it was regrettable how it happened, but I liked you. I liked working with you through it. And my takeaways from that is you never know where someone's going to end up or something's going to end up. So to the next generation, keep building the relationships, find a fun niche, disrupt something, and build a business around it. There's going to be so much technology, and it's not just the big guys anymore. Tesla, Elon started with an idea, and he took on Detroit. That you have to have massive resources to do that usually, and he did it without being Detroit. Many people failed with that, and he did it by disrupting the technology and the stream. You have to find a niche and do that. And there's more ideas than that, better ones than that out there. Get out there and find something. Get a good mentor in the industry, someone who will teach you some of that, and something that to impart on you, and listen to them. Learn to listen.
Yeah. That's it. It's like a mic drop right there. Learn to listen. You let it up. Learn to listen, and I think we all are still evolving, learning to listen, because I think listening is number one for even from the generation. You guys got to listen.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
We can't distract. Listen, learn, look. I just call it that 3 L's: look, listen, and learn.
Absolutely.
Well, thanks, Chris. This has been great. Thank you so much for coming. Real talk, man.
Love being here.
I loved it. I mean, you're just dropping some knowledge and information on it. Was very good to have you. And I can't, we got to do this again.
Absolutely. Anytime.
I love it. Well, thanks again.
Thank you.
Yeah.